Imagine picking up a book, settling into your favorite chair, and opening to the first page, only to realize by the end of the chapter that the words you're reading are starting to rewrite the way your own brain functions. We like to think of stories as safe spaces where we can explore different worlds from the comfort of our own homes. But history tells us that some books are less like entertainment and more like a psychological virus. These aren't your typical horror stories with jump scares and monsters. These are journeys into the basement of the human soul, exploring territories of obsession, isolation, and moral decay that most people spend their entire lives trying to ignore. Today, we are opening the restricted section to examine 7 novels that were considered so psychologically dark they were seen as a threat to those who dared to read them. We are talking about books that caused scandals, triggered social panics, and left readers feeling like they could never quite return to the person they were before they turned the final page. We have to start with a book that actually created a phenomenon so intense it has its own name in clinical psychology. I'm talking about The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, published in 1774. Now, on the surface, this looks like a classic tale of unrequited love. It's written as a series of letters from a sensitive young artist named Werther to his friend. Werther falls deeply in love with a woman named Charlotte, but she is already engaged to someone else. The psychological darkness comes from Werther's total and absolute spiral into emotional fragmentation. He doesn't just feel sad, he becomes consumed by a heavy melancholy that makes every beauty in the world feel like a weight. When the book was released, it became the first international bestseller, but it also triggered what we now call the Werther effect. Young men all over Europe began dressing like the character, wearing yellow trousers and blue jackets. But more alarmingly, they began mimicking his final, tragic choice to end his own story. The book was blamed for a wave of copycat incidents across the continent, leading authorities in places like Italy, Germany, and Denmark to actually ban the novel. They believed the prose was so persuasive, so beautiful, and so contagious in its despair that it could literally talk a reader into giving up on life. It remains one of the most famous examples of a book being considered a public health hazard. Moving forward into the 20th century, we encounter a novel that feels like a cold, clinical descent into the void. The Blind Owl by Sadegh Hidayat. This is widely considered the most important work of modern Iranian literature, but for a long time it was whispered about as a cursed book. The story follows an unnamed narrator, a pen-case painter, who lives in a feverish, nightmarish state of isolation. The narrative is circular, repetitive, and filled with haunting imagery of shadows and ancient buildings. It's a book that explores the concept of the internal predator, the idea that our own minds can become cages that slowly dismantle our sense of reality. The psychological weight of the prose is so heavy that legend says people who read it while in a fragile state of mind would find themselves unable to snap back to the light. It explores a level of nihilism that is almost suffocating. During certain periods in Iran, the book was suppressed not just for political reasons, but because it was thought to induce a state of spiritual paralysis in the youth. It's a novel that doesn't just tell a story. It creates an atmosphere of deep, unshakable unease that lingers in the corners of your mind long after you put it down. Then there is the book that defined the transgressive genre and caused a massive legal battle in the 1990s, American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. While many people know the movie, the book is a completely different beast. It is a relentless, first-person dive into the mind of Patrick Bateman, a wealthy Wall Street investment banker. The psychological darkness here isn't just in the graphic scenes. It's in the terrifying emptiness of the narrator. Bateman is a man who is obsessed with the surface, the quality of a business card, the brand of a moisturizing cream, the reservation at a high-end restaurant, because there is absolutely nothing underneath. The book uses a tone of extreme boredom to describe horrifying acts, creating a cognitive dissonance in the reader that is deeply distressing. It was considered dangerous because it stripped away the traditional moral center of a story. There is no lesson, no redemption, and no escape from the narrator's flat, robotic perspective. In Germany, it was classified as harmful to minors for years, and in many places it was sold only in shrink wrap to prevent casual browsing. It makes the reader a reluctant passenger in a mind that has completely lost its connection to human empathy. If we want to discuss the darkness of obsession and the loss of innocence, we have to look at Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. This is perhaps one of the most controversial books ever written, and for decades it was banned in the United Kingdom, France, and many parts of the United States. The danger of this book lies in the sheer brilliance of the writing. Nabokov makes his narrator, Humbert Humbert, an incredibly eloquent, witty, and cultured man. He uses beautiful, shimmering prose to try and justify his predatory obsession with a young girl. The psychological trap for the reader is that you find yourself seduced by the language while being repulsed by the actions. It forces you into a state of moral gymnastics that is incredibly uncomfortable. It was considered dangerous because it proved that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a charming, intellectual gentleman who can quote poetry. The book is a masterpiece of deception, showing how a fractured mind can create an elaborate, beautiful architecture to hide its own rot. It's a novel that challenges your trust in the narrator and, by extension, your trust in your own ability to discern the truth. Now, let's step into the world of total psychological isolation with The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Published originally under a pseudonym, this semi-autobiographical novel is a vivid, visceral account of a young woman's slide into clinical depression. The bell jar is the metaphor for the suffocating, distorted air that the narrator feels trapped under. Unlike many books that describe sadness from the outside, Plath takes you inside the mechanical feeling of a mind that is breaking. You feel the weight of every choice, the pressure of societal expectations, and the grayness that starts to seep into every interaction. The book was seen as dangerous because of its raw honesty. It didn't offer a tidy, happy ending. Instead, it presented mental health struggles as a complex, ongoing battle with no easy exits. For generations, it has been a forbidden text for those who feared its ability to validate a reader's darkest thoughts. It's a powerful, beautiful, and deeply painful book that captures the gravity of the mind's internal struggles with an intensity that few other authors have ever achieved. For a look at the darkness of the collective human spirit, we turn to Lord of the Flies by William Golding. While many of us read this in school, we often forget how truly dark the psychological implications are. Golding wrote this as a response to the optimistic adventure stories of the time where British schoolboys would get stranded on an island and build a perfect civilization. Golding, having witnessed the horrors of a world-scale conflict, wanted to show the beast that lives inside every human being when the constraints of society are removed. The psychological horror here isn't the island. It's how quickly the boys, educated, well-mannered children, descend into a state of tribalism and cruelty. It was considered dangerous by some because it challenges the fundamental belief in the basic goodness of humanity. It suggests that our civilization is just a thin, fragile veneer over something much older and much more predatory. It's a book that makes you look at the person sitting next to you and wonder what they would be capable of if the lights went out and the rules vanished. And finally, we have the novel that is often called the most depressing book in the English language, Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. When it was published in 1895, it caused such a massive public outcry that a bishop actually burned a copy of it, and Hardy was so shaken by the reaction that he never wrote another novel for the rest of his life. The story follows a young man named Jude who dreams of a university education and a better life, but he is trapped by his social class, a disastrous marriage, and a series of relentless tragedies. The psychological darkness comes from the inevitability of failure. Hardy presents a world where the universe is indifferent to human suffering, and where every attempt to rise is met with a crushing blow. The book includes a scene involving a character named Little Father Time that is so psychologically traumatic it remains one of the most infamous moments in literature. It was considered dangerous because it attacked the institutions of marriage, the church, and the educational system all at once, suggesting that they were traps designed to break the human spirit. It is a relentless, uncompromising look at the bleakness of existence that leaves the reader feeling emotionally drained and questioning the very structures of our world. Why were these books seen as a threat? It's because they don't just tell stories, they provoke us. They force us to confront parts of our own nature that we would rather keep hidden. They take the invisible struggles of our minds and make them vivid and inescapable. In a world that often wants us to stay focused on the surface, these novels act like deep-sea divers, bringing back reports from the dark trenches of the human experience. The danger of a book is often a measure of its truth. When a society bans a book like Lolita or Lord of the Flies, it's often because that society is afraid to look in the mirror the book is holding up. We are afraid of the Werther effect because we know how fragile our emotional balance can be. We are afraid of Patrick Bateman because we recognize the hollow materialism of our own age. We are afraid of Sylvia Plath's Bell Jar because we felt that same stale air ourselves. These novels are psychologically dark because they don't offer the easy comforts of a traditional narrative. They don't promise that everything will be okay. They don't provide a hero who saves the day. Instead, they provide a witness to the complexity, the pain, and the shadows of being human. They suggest that the darkness isn't something external that we can fight with a sword. It's something internal that we have to understand. Reading these books requires a certain level of psychological courage. It's an act of stepping into the fog and trusting that you'll find your way back out. But for those who do make the journey, these novels offer a profound level of insight. They show us that we are not alone in our struggles. They give words to feelings that previously had no names. They allow us to process our fears and our obsessions in a safe, controlled way, through the medium of the page. However, the cautionary label isn't entirely without merit. Just as we wouldn't advise someone with a broken leg to run a marathon, these books might not be the best choice for someone going through an acute crisis. Their intensity can be overwhelming. They are meant for a mind that is ready to engage with the difficult parts of existence. They are the heavy lifting of literature, designed to build psychological muscle and expand our understanding of the world's complexity. Think about the impact of a book like 1984. While it's often seen as political, its true power is psychological. It's about the erasure of the self and the manipulation of thought. It makes you question your own memory and your own perception of reality. That is a dark, dangerous place for a mind to go. But by going there, we become more aware of the value of our own mental autonomy. We become more resistant to the beasts that would try to control us. The history of these 7 novels is a history of the boundaries of human expression. Every time an author like Bret Easton Ellis or Thomas Hardy pushes the envelope, they are testing the limits of what we can handle as a culture. They are asking us, can you see this? Can you face this? Sometimes the answer is a resounding no, leading to bans and burnings. But over time, these dark books often become the most cherished parts of our literary heritage. We realize that they were the pioneers who went into the shadows so that we wouldn't have to be afraid of them. When you finish a truly challenging dark novel, you often feel a sense of catharsis. It's like a storm has passed through and cleared the air. You've seen the worst that humanity has to offer, and you've survived it. You've explored the deepest valleys of depression or obsession, and you've climbed back up to the sunlight. This emotional journey is one of the most powerful things a piece of art can provide. It makes us more resilient, more empathetic, and more human. But what about the danger of the Werther effect, or the copycats? It's a reminder that stories have power. They aren't just ink on a page. They are blueprints for how we see ourselves. This doesn't mean we should censor these books, but it does mean we should treat them with respect. We should acknowledge their weight and their potential impact. We should read them with an active mind, questioning the narrators and engaging with the themes rather than just passively absorbing the despair. The Blind Owl or Jude the Obscure are not books you read to feel happy. They are books you read to feel real. They provide a specific kind of honesty that is rare in a world of filtered lives and curated happiness. They remind us that suffering is a part of the human story, and that facing that suffering is an act of dignity. They take the forbidden thoughts, the ones we are told not to have, and they put them center stage. As we look at these 7 novels, we see a map of the human shadow. From the romantic obsession of Werther to the cold nihilism of the owl, from the empty narcissism of Bateman to the moral trap of Humbert, from the suffocating depression of the bell jar to the tribal cruelty of the schoolboys and the tragic inevitability of Jude. Each book covers a different territory of the darkness. Each one offers a different warning. The psychological darkness of these books is a form of exploration. It's about finding the edges of the human experience. We want to know that even in the darkest parts of the soul, there is a story to be told. By examining these dangerous books, we are also examining the history of freedom. The right to read about the worst parts of ourselves is just as important as the right to read about the best. It's about the total freedom of thought. When we label a book as dangerously dark, we are often just admitting that it has cracked our defenses. It has reached a place that we were trying to keep closed. So, the next time you hear about a book that is being pulled from the shelves or described as mentally harmful, take a second to wonder what truth it might be telling. What shadow is it illuminating? The stories that are considered the most perilous are often the ones that have the most to teach us about the nature of the mind. They are the ones that challenge our complacency and wake us up from our comfort. The journey through these 7 novels is a journey through the night of the soul. It's an intense, challenging, and often heavy path. But it's also a path that leads to a deeper, more complex appreciation of the light. We cannot truly know the day unless we have seen the night. We cannot truly value our sanity unless we have explored the borders of its breakdown. These authors, the Goldings, the Plaths, the Hediats, took a risk when they wrote these books. They were willing to be misunderstood, attacked, and even erased in order to tell an honest story about the darkness. They were the canaries in the coal mine, signaling when the psychological air of society was becoming toxic. We owe it to them and to ourselves to listen to their warnings. As you look at your bookshelf tonight, maybe you'll feel a bit differently about those dark titles sitting in the corner. Maybe you'll see them not as depressing, but as brave. Maybe you'll realize that the danger of a book is just another word for its impact. And maybe, when you are ready, you'll open one of them and let the shadows tell you their story. Thank you for exploring this restricted section with us today. The world of literature is vast, and the darker corners hold some of its most profound and challenging secrets. Keep reading, keep questioning, and never be afraid to go where the labels tell you not to. Because in the heart of the psychological darkness, you might just find the most vivid light of all. The abyss is waiting, the pages are turning, and the truth is ready to be found, no matter how dangerous it might seem. Stay curious, stay resilient, and always remember the power of the story to change your world. Happy reading if you dare.